Okay, Jim, let's dig in here and see if we can shed some light on some of the cause and effect relationships going on in your golf swing. If we take a look at the down the line view here, just a couple things I want to call out and point out to your attention. You start with what I would consider a reasonable amount of flex in your trail leg or in both knees. Where I see the issue is throughout the course of the backswing, your knees don't change flex very much. And as you know, limiting the extension of the trail leg is going to have a deep effect on basically how much the pelvis can rotate, and then the rotation of the pelvis is going to have an effect on how much the torso can rotate, and how much the torso rotates is going to have an effect on how deep the hand path can get. And the hand path being deep is important for a number of reasons, primarily to shallow the club, but number one, to make the club move further around our body. So when I say depth of the hand path, I'm basically talking about the lead arm relative to your toe line here at about this position, parallel. So you've got a lot of hand path depth, but the way that you're getting it is a little bit non-functional. So you're achieving this depth not through a lot of rotation of your body, but more so by just pulling your left arm kind of across your chest in the backswing. And again, that's all due to the limitation of the rotation of your body. Now, as we near when we talk about depth of the hand path, it's most important to talk about it in its totality, which means by the time you get to the top of the backswing, how far has the butt of the club traveled from the golf ball? So one of the things I'll generally do as an illustration of my players is I will draw a straight line 90 degrees down from the butt of the club and just give them a frame of reference of like where the butt of the club is relative to their foot or their ankle, if you will. And you can see that crosses about mid-foot there in your case. And we'll look at the same thing from face on here. We can see not a lot of early rotation. We can see you actually gaining, I think you're actually gaining some bend in your trail leg, and it's causing your pelvis to rotate really level, and you don't get a lot of tilt to the pelvis at the top of your backswing. And so here's the problem with that. Generally, players who retain a lot of bend in their trail leg, who don't create some inclination of their pelvis, and when I say inclination, I'm basically talking about the right hip being significantly higher than the left. When it's time to transition, these golfers generally have to push off their right side out of the ground in order to get their pressure to start moving back towards the target. And so that's one of the big reasons why I am not a fan of a very level hip turn in the backswing, and I'm not a big fan of limiting rotation, limiting extension of the trail leg, and not creating some inclination of the pelvis. So if we take a look really quick of sort of some model behaviors with the pelvis, we're going to see how the trail leg extending is going to basically influence the tilt of the pelvis. And you can see by this diagram here on the right, this is basically 3D, and if we focus on this blue line here, that is basically showing you a good indication of how this golfer's pelvis is tilting throughout the course of the backswing. And the reason why this pelvis is tilting is obviously because this golfer is applying a force out of the ground. He's extending his trail leg, or he's pushing into the ground. And that is indicated by these arrows that you see kind of spiking or growing in this phase of the backswing. So as the trail leg extends, and the left leg flexes, you can see the arrows are strongly coming out of the right foot, and there's almost no pressure coming out of the left foot. That means he's unweighting the left foot. The pelvis is starting to turn on a tilt and an incline, and this is a very, very important frame that you see here at the top of the backswing. Now, because this golfer has created this incline, or this tilt, this inclination to the pelvis, he's going to have momentum to fall off of to move his pressure back onto his lead side. And in your case, you're having to push off of that right side. I'll bring you back up here. And because you're having to push off that right side, you're pushing your hips too far forward. And when you push your hips too far forward, it limits your ability to rotate in the downswing. So you never really quite get off of your right side. You get a big lateral slide with basically your back facing the target here. So the pressure is moving from off your right foot into your lead side. Your hips are sliding forward, and your back is staying to the target. Now, there's a reason why you're coordinating that lower body movement, and it is a byproduct of basically where the club is at the top. So if we think about that for a second, we know that with any given top of the backswing hand position, let's just circle yours right there. For every position we put the club in, when you transition, there's going to be a certain amount of down, and there's going to be a certain amount of outward force that you can apply to that grip. So the less depth you get in the backswing, the more downward force you're going to have to get, because otherwise you would just come over the top of the ball. And the deeper hand path position, the more outward force you would have to get. So for example, let's say I just got your hand path a little deeper, and now all of a sudden your hands were over here at the top. Well, now what this would look like, there would be less down, and there would be more outward force being applied to the grip. Now, this outward force is important because that is what gets the center of mass of that golf club to start to move back up and around behind the golfer and kind of shallow the club out. And in your case, when you start to move your hands out, there isn't very much room for you to move your hands out because your left arm gets out on your toe line very quickly. So when I say out on the toe line, I'm talking about its relationship in this direction. And the problem with that is if you kept turning your body very dynamically, you would be steep and you would swing really far left across the golf ball. So your instinctive matchup with this hand path position at the top and this left arm shift out is to start extending and standing up and turning off rotation. So if we just kind of look at, if we mark your head position here, you start coming down, you notice your head starts pulling back and away from the golf ball, and that's all in an effort to get that center of mass of that club back behind your hands here. The problem is you're stalling the rotation in this phase over here on the right. So you're sliding those hips forward, you're keeping the back to the target, lowering your arms down, standing up. And as you do that, as you turn the rotation off, you're going to start to see the club head starts to pass the handle quickly. And that's where the club face control issues come in. So from a down the line view, we can see that as the body stops its rotation and you start to stand up, the club starts to violently kind of flip past you. And so this isn't happening because there's a lack of athleticism or a lack of coordination. This is just a basic geometry issue. This left arm should be far more in than it is right now. If we throw up an example here on the right, of kind of what I'm talking about. So you'll notice that a lot of rotation, a lot of inclination, very, very deep hand path at the top. When he starts down, his left arm is still significantly to the inside. It's still inside his toe line. And from there, he can continue to rotate his body and not get closed, and that center of mass is still working back behind his hands. And in your case, because the hand path isn't quite deep enough at the top, and again, it's not deep enough because of the trail leg retaining its flex. And this is kind of a highly debated topic amongst golf pros, but if I just start throwing up some trail leg kind of models, in my opinion, there's no debate. I mean, these are the greatest players that's ever played golf. Nicklaus, Snead, Palmer, number one in the world. Like, these guys aren't resisting with their lower bodies. These guys aren't keeping their back leg flexed. These guys are allowing their trail leg to lengthen out. They're extending their trail knee, and they're creating a really nice inclination to their pelvis, and it's allowing their arms and the club to orbit their body more. So this is exactly where I would start with you. I need you to move pressure into your right side. I need you to lengthen out this trail leg. I need you to get this right hip higher in the backswing, and I need you to allow your hand path, so it's nice and deep here, but it can't keep getting deeper. I need it to continue to move in the direction of this shaft so that when you get to the top, your hands are more in this position. And that can't happen with the bracing and the resisting you've got going on with the lower body. So hopefully that clears up sort of the cause and effect of why you're a little steep at the top, why you're a little steep out of transition, why you have to push off your right side, keep your body closed, and turn off your rotation in an effort to get this club back behind your hands in this position, which is where all good players are, and you're a good player. The problem is you're turning off your rotation to be able to get to that position, and then it's just a pure timing game with the club face control.